You have seen the pyramids of Egypt your entire life, on documentaries, in school textbooks, in Hollywood movies, but nobody ever showed you these. Further south, deeper in Africa, more pyramids deeper, older in tradition, and built by a civilization that did something Egypt never expected. They invaded it, they conquered it, they ruled it. For nearly 100 years, Egypt was governed by black African pharaohs from the Kingdom of Kush, and the world was never told. The Kingdom of Kush rose along the Nile River in what is now Sudan, directly south of Egypt. They were not a primitive people living in the shadow of Egypt. They built cities, they mined gold, they traded across Africa and the Middle East. Their capital, Meroe, was one of the most advanced cities in the ancient world. Kush had its own writing system, its own gods, its own architecture. For centuries, Egypt and Kush watched each other across the desert. Then everything changed. By 750 BC, Egypt, the greatest empire in the ancient world, was falling apart from the inside. Rival kings were fighting each other for the throne. Foreign invaders were pressing from the north. The priests were losing control. The army was divided. Egypt was fracturing. And to the south, a Kushite king named Piye was watching. He had been watching for a long time. Around 747 BC, King Piye of Kush launched his army north along the Nile. City by city, the Egyptian rulers surrendered or were defeated. Hermopolis fell. Heracleopolis fell. Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital, fell. Piye entered the sacred temples of Egypt not as an invader, but as a liberator and a pharaoh. He performed every Egyptian religious ritual correctly. He respected every tradition. The Egyptian priests accepted him. A black African king from Sudan had just become pharaoh of Egypt. This was not a raid. This was a dynasty. Piye's conquest created what historians call the 25th dynasty of Egypt. After Piye came Shabaka. After Shabaka came Taharqa, one of the most powerful pharaohs Egypt had ever seen. Taharqa built monuments across Egypt and Nubia. He restored temples. He expanded trade. He was so powerful that his name appears in the Bible in the Book of Kings as a king who stood against the Assyrian Empire. For nearly 100 years, black African kings from Kush sat on the throne of the most famous civilization in human history. European historians buried this fact for centuries. Of all the Kushite pharaohs, Taharqa was the most extraordinary. He ruled from 690 to 664 BC, controlling an empire that stretched from Sudan to the borders of modern Israel. He built more monuments than almost any pharaoh before him. When the Assyrian Empire, the most feared military force in the world at that time, invaded Egypt, it was Taharqa who stood in their path. He fought them not once, but 3 times. A black African king defending Egypt against the world's greatest army. Ask yourself, why was this man never in your history textbook? In 671 BC, the Assyrians invaded Egypt with iron weapons, and the military force Kush could not match. Taharqa was pushed south. His successor Tanudaman made one final attempt to retake Egypt and nearly succeeded. But eventually, the Kushite pharaohs withdrew back to Nubia. Their reign over Egypt had ended. But here is what history never tells you: Kush did not collapse. The kingdom returned home, rebuilt, and continued for another 1,000 years. A civilization that outlasted the Roman Empire by centuries. Back in their heartland, the Kushites built Meroe into one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. Meroe was the ironworking capital of Africa, producing weapons and tools that were traded across the continent. They built hundreds of pyramids, more pyramids than Egypt ever did. Sudan has more ancient pyramids than Egypt. Most people will never learn this. Their queens, called Candaces, ruled with full military power. One Candake defeated a Roman army sent by Augustus Caesar and forced Rome to sign a peace treaty on her terms. This was Kush, an empire the world was trained to forget. When European archaeologists began excavating Egypt in the 1800s, they had a problem. The evidence of black African pharaohs was everywhere in the carvings, the statues, the written records. So they did what colonial powers always did. They reinterpreted it. They classified ancient Egyptians as a separate race from the rest of Africa. They described Kushite pharaohs as an interruption, a foreign invasion rather than an African dynasty ruling an African civilization. They chiseled context out of history, the same way some pharaohs chiseled names off monuments. And for over a century, the world believed their version. But the proof survived. The statues of Taharqa found in Sudan and now in museums across Europe show unmistakably African features. The ancient carvings inside Egyptian temples record the 25th dynasty in full detail. In 2003, National Geographic ran a landmark cover story on the Black Pharaohs, and the world was shocked. Shocked because this had been hidden in plain sight for over 100 years. The pyramids of Meroe still stand in Sudan today, over 200 of them. They were never hidden. The world was simply never pointed toward them. The Kingdom of Kush lasted for over 1,000 years. It produced pharaohs who ruled Egypt, queens who defeated Rome, and engineers who built hundreds of pyramids. Its capital, Meroe, was a center of iron production, trade, and culture when most of Europe was living in mud huts. This is not a minor footnote in history. This is one of the greatest civilizations the human race has ever produced. It just happened to be African, and that is exactly why they buried it. Every time you saw a documentary about ancient Egypt, Kush was right there, just out of frame. Every time they showed you the pyramids, there were more pyramids they never panned the camera to. This was not an accident. They built a version of history that made Africa look like it had no story worth telling. But Africa was building empires, writing languages, and producing pharaohs while the rest of the world was catching up. You were never meant to know this. Now you do, and you cannot unknow it. If this changed the way you see history, share it with someone who needs to see it too. Subscribe to Africa Untold, because we're just getting started. Next week, we're going even deeper into stories that were buried, burned, and erased. Drop a comment below. Did you know Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt? Let us see how many people are learning this for the first time.